So, for our last set of slides on observation, I wanted to share with you a little bit about a project that I conducted when I pretty much first came to Alaska. And just to keep it very clear, observation can be a method in itself, but it also is often part of other methods. It's often a way we enter a scene or get an idea of what's going on to be able to develop our interviews or our focus groups or our surveys or other parts of our research. But here's an example of a sort of participant observation study I did around bingo parlors in Fairbanks. And in Fairbanks, a lot of people play bingo, and especially older women who are often Alaska Native will play bingo, and it's a really big part of these people's lives. There are three pretty large bingo places in Fairbanks, which is not that large in itself. Um, People go, it's open 24/7. No, it's not open 24/7. It's open 7 days a week, not 24 hours, but a lot of hours. And it's a place where people really go often if they're into bingo. So I was wondering, what is it like to play bingo in Fairbanks? Who are the key actors? Who participates in bingo? What is the feel or atmosphere? And then, as a public health professional, I wanted to know, what are the health and health promotion implications of bingo for me as a person wanting to work in Alaska? What are the opportunities for research in terms of, recruiting people who go to bingo all the time, data collection? Would they do a survey for me? Is this a place for on-site health promotion around like smoking or cancer survivorship and other things? So we did some informal observations. We did it of two of the three places in Fairbanks, Downtown Bingo and Youth Sports Bingo. One of the places was just opening, and they really did not like the idea of researchers coming in and ruining the vibe. So we weren't allowed to do an observation in this other place. We went on just two separate dates that I'm going to talk about. And the observers were myself, a research assistant, and my mom was in town, so she came and played bingo too. And the actors we found were players, so bingo players, staff that worked there, the people who called the numbers, who were really, really popular there, people who worked at concession stands, and there were also kids running around because they had a childcare room. We noted the arrangement of the place, the activities that went around with bingo, and what was the atmosphere and the vibe of the place. So what we found by just going and observing was that each bingo place had a similar or different layout, atmosphere, participants, and offerings. So in terms of the layouts, the space, at that time, smoking was allowed in bingo halls, and they had designated smoking and non-smoking areas. Very recently, they became non-smoking, so that would be a non-issue right now, which was a big deal at that time. Each place also had a different type of concessions and a little daycare. They had different lighting, seating, decorations, and waste management in each of the places, obviously. But we noted these things, and each place had their own feel to them. So some people will actually just go to one place because they just are used to the feel of that place, just like you would of your favorite restaurant. Activities offered were playing and gambling. People would buy multiple bingo cards. They use their daubers, these little paint sticks that allow you to show the number that you're working with, like the number called. There are also machines that have the cards in them, so that if you put in a number, it automatically finds whether you have that bingo number on your cards. There were also pull tabs, which is a way of buying these little cards that if you pull off the tab, it tells you if you won or not. And they had different drawings. So different times you might buy a ticket to be in a drawing to win money or some kind of prize. In terms of during bingo, a lot of people would ask for help. So people weren't afraid to raise their hand and ask a staff person to come over and help them or buy them something from the concessions or help them open something. So it was a helping situation. We saw a lot of people with rituals, people who had medallions or little angel statues to give them luck or strategies. We heard from people who managed the bingo places that people would sit in the same places, so they had their lucky spots. And we would see the same people, and it's just like a classroom where you sit in your seat. There's a lot of socializing. Kids were running around. They weren't just stuck in their daycare. They could run out and see their moms and dads and aunties and uncles. People smoked, and people were eating a lot. The vibes were fun but serious. It's very quiet during play. When the numbers are being yelled out, people are very quiet. And what I found with these both bingo halls was there's low emotion with the winners and non-winners. So if somebody wins bingo, they would just go bingo, and they wouldn't get all excited and jump around because it was very serious. And the person would come and check out their card and make sure they had indeed won bingo, and then people would sit quietly while it happened and then move on to the next card. So here I asked you in your reflection, when you returned, how did you observe? Like when you went for your first time observing, how was it different the second time? And that's where we get into the more structured versus non-structured. And we didn't go back very often for the bingo. That was just sort of a observation that turned into more talking to people via focus groups. But if we would have gone back and structured it, we might have actually developed a grid of specific things we were looking at and had a number of people observing. And then, at certain times, looking at the different tables where people played and really noting what was going on at that certain time across the whole room. We could have been very, very structured and maybe standardized and trained to do this. How did you feel about being an observer? Were there any ethical dilemmas? Now, you can go into a place and observe as long as you're not going to be identifying individuals and really being obtrusive to them. So ethically, you can go in and make observations, but it depends on what you want to do with the information and how much you want to be a part of what happens from the observations. How can you be unobtrusive? This is a great quote. It took a while for the research element to become wallpaper. So, it might take, hanging out a long time in a certain place to become non-noticeable so that you're not infringing on what normally would happen in this natural setting. Should people be overt or covert? It really depends. Everything about this type of research really depends. There's different pros and cons to being very hidden or very, very non-hidden in what you're doing. Do people have the right to know they're being observed? That's something, again, when you go to a coffee shop for a class, maybe they don't. I felt that I really needed to talk to the managers of the bingo places because I did not know where my observations would take me. And so I really wanted to get their input on whether they wanted me there or not. And indeed, I found that one place did not want me there. Do people need to give their consent? They really don't, unless you're not supposed to be in that area. Like on a school playground, you really need to get consent to be able to do work as researcher. But if you're in a public setting where you can be doing people watching anyway, really people don't need to give consent. How can you leave a participant observation? If you're part of a group and you're observing and maybe you've hidden what you're doing, you have to find a way to not be there anymore if you're going to leave the situation. And that, again, it all depends on what you're doing. And you have to think about the safety implications. So I took my research assistants and my mom into this very smoke-filled place. And that was a safety consideration to observation. And there's also others. You want to make sure that you're not observing in a place where you could get hurt, where you could put anybody at harm, where you change the vibe to the point where others might get hurt. So again, in terms of ethics, it all depends on what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what your outcomes of your observation will be used for. What did you learn from your observation and what expectations were validated or not? I look forward to reading your reflections and knowing what you learned and what was validated or not for you. what we learn from observation is that there are a lot of strengths and limitations in all research methods, and therefore we use triangulation. We often will use multiple ways of knowing and learning in our research to overcome some of the limitations and draw on our strengths. Observation is a great way to go into a situation to find out how should I move forward with my research. Observation might be the full research gamut that you're using, but it's important to know the strengths and limitations of any method, including observations. So I hope you enjoyed this week's work, and we'll move on to more methods.